Marchese, and we're really glad to have you with us as we continue with our podcast series on building bridges to a better cultural intelligence. As we move deeper into this subject, we want to bring theory and practice together. But to explore the actual challenges that business leaders encounter today as they work across cultures in the global marketplace, we need to head to the front lines. To do that, we need to enter the global marketplace of ideas so that we can bring you a discussion that we know will be both valuable and insightful. Today, Raj and I are going to bring you a conversation we had with our colleague, Jonathan Stutz, who is the President and Chief Diversity Officer at Global Diversity Partners, a US-based company headquartered in Seattle. Jonathan consults with Fortune 100 companies throughout the world on strategies for diversity, for inclusion, and for cross-cultural competencies. He has conducted training for his clients all over the globe. But before he became a consultant, Jonathan worked in leadership positions at Amazon, at Microsoft, and Zulily, just to name a few. He has a wealth of experience that he brings to our dialogue on cultural intelligence. In fact, it's quite interesting because Raj and I met Jonathan in the marketplace of ideas. After we published our article in the Puget Sound Business Journal, Why Cultural Intelligence is Needed Now More Than Ever, Jonathan reached out to us, something for which Raj and I are incredibly grateful. We believe so strongly that dialogue and discussion are indispensable when it comes to helping others, including ourselves, to develop a deeper cultural intelligence. To help our clients build better bridges, Raj and I also need to build better bridges of collaboration with our colleagues and with our counterparts. And we are so very honored to have Jonathan provide that opportunity for all of us by joining this important discussion. The topic of cultural intelligence is complex and dynamic. What's more, COVID-19 has had a profound impact on the way we do business in the global marketplace. The way we communicate, the way we connect with one another, for example, have become much more challenging during the pandemic. And quite frankly, that has tended to widen the cultural gap of understanding for all of us during this period. But as countries reopen borders and companies re-engage in the global marketplace, there will be new and better opportunities. But to access these opportunities, to take advantage of them, that is going to require a better and more sophisticated cultural intelligence from all of us. So with that, it is with great excitement and enthusiasm that Raj and I welcome Jonathan to the closing argument. So let's hear from Jonathan and let's launch into this discussion from the front lines.
Thank you, Jonathan, for taking the time to speak with us about cultural intelligence and building bridges between different cultures. And it's a particularly topical subject here in Italy and many parts of Europe. And of course, as you know very well, an important subject in the current business and political environment in the US. So let me just start off our conversation with by asking you a very basic question. We know that most American companies have diversity offices on their management teams and as part of their workforce. Now, while diversity and inclusion are important areas of focus for European companies, many actually don't yet have a dedicated position such as a diversity officer. So, Jonathan, this is something that our Italian and European colleagues will be very interested in learning more about. But can you start our discussion today by describing what are some of the typical duties and responsibilities of diversity offices at American companies?
Sure. So, many of the American companies, and I imagine international companies, have the C-level roles, the chief technical officer or the chief operations officer. And so we're seeing greater and greater adoption for the chief diversity officer role, or the CDO. And this is a role that has both internal and external responsibilities. The internal responsibilities are for ownership of developing the vision, the strategy, and really to set and lead the operational approach. They, in many cases, would influence the board of directors. They ultimately should report to the chief executive officer and president of the organization in a role that can be advisory, consultant, really a teacher, mentor, and even a coach to leadership. To employee resource groups, they would be the primary point of contact to help lead them, and they may have people reporting to them that operationally implement. But primarily, these employee resource groups would be historically oppressed or marginalized populations that it makes sense to come together and bring community, and they would help develop those and advance those in the organization. But ultimately, the idea is for inclusion, diversity, and equity to be woven into the fabric of the company. Many companies put diversity under the umbrella of HR, and it really should only report to the senior most level of the company. And to become really a business issue, to be considered in every decision point of the company. The other side of it is the external, and this is to be deeply involved in the recruiting strategy, outreach into the community, developing trusted relationships, long-term trusted relationships, not transactional in that regard, public relations, communications with the community and customers, shareholders, and really community connection. They may be a keynote at events, conferences, networking with others, chief diversity officer professionals for best practices and recruiting even, and really a connector of people. So that's kind of how I see the CDO role in organizations.
So I'd like to start talking a little bit about the business climate and kind of the real ground conditions today. The government here in Italy just announced recently that the country may actually have herd immunity by the end of September. We'll have to see about that, right? But as we kind of like around the globe fight to emerge from the pandemic, different countries around the world are trying to reopen borders, and many companies are trying to re-engage in the global marketplace. And it's kind of hard to get an accurate picture of from what we see, what we read, what we hear in the media as well as social media. But you know, it seems to us like the ground conditions here in Europe appear much different than in the United States. So what do you think are the kind of the real ground conditions of the business world? What are they like right now in the US? How are businesses trying to re-engage in the marketplace? And what seems different to you about the way companies are doing business today?
Absolutely. So similar to other places around the world, and depending on where you go in the US and which company you're talking about, what they do and how they execute their business, it'll vary greatly. But there's clearly a class divide between workers who can and cannot work from home. Some of the data that's out there, Pew Research did some recent studies, 62% of those degreed can work from home. So while a majority of upper income earners can do their work from home, most lower and middle income workers cannot. And then there's income disparity in work from home as well. The research shows that 76% of low income workers cannot do their work from home, compared to 63% of middle income and 44% of upper income. So this is, concerning. And then you get into, other data that shows there may even be some inequities around race and gender, which we can talk about later. But there's a great deal of volatility in the U.S. right now with a new U.S. president and a Democratic House and Senate, our Congress, but a very conservative-leaning Supreme Court. And with COVID not yet under control, though slowly improving, there's a great deal of uncertainty right now. Businesses with brick and mortar locations are really struggling to adjust to online competition that they've been slow, especially those that have been slow to adopt or at least gone all in with service, price, quality, in that regard, that where they can compete effectively. So we're still seeing a kind of a fleshing out of how things are going to land.
I've been hearing, and this is not a new idea, but very often hear this kind of notion of the new normal. And I think I may be one of the few people that hasn't actually completely bought into this concept. I mean, the fact is the world is changing, of course, constantly. And I mean, if you look back maybe just 10 or 15 years and see how much things have changed, a lot has changed, of course. But one thing that is, undeniable is that COVID has indeed kind of precipitated social, business, technological changes that may have taken much longer to happen. For example, smart working. It's not a new concept, neither is what we're doing right now using Zoom, but the degree to which we are now using this platform and this mechanism of working has certainly changed dramatically in the past year or so. So what do you think? What are the things you believe are the new quote unquote new normal? And what do you think will be the things we'll go back to? What are the we'll return to the old normal?
Well, certainly there's, just right now, there's a much greater tolerance for flexible schedules, of course, working from home, taking time off for mental health and wellness. I'm seeing an increase in the encouragement for taking time off, spending time away from the Zoom and the computer. So greater empathy all around, which I think is super healthy, and I hope that will last. There's a desire to understand the experience of the other because of the racial issues happening that have really bubbled up in the US in the last year. With companies are doubling down, as you talked about at the top, tripling down on inclusion, diversity, and equity efforts, hiring of diversity professionals. The job openings for diversity professionals is ballooned. Making resources available for training, outreach, employee resource groups, and even senior level diversity roles. But certainly, of course, this huge shift in people working from home. But there's also less. I think when we get back to the new normal, I think we will see more people still continuing to work from home. We've created new habits. They say it takes 66 days, the study showed, to create a new habit, and I think we're well beyond that. And there's a new expectation that you can work from home, and because it's also shown to be more productive. I know the studies that have been done on developers writing lines of code with my former employer was that they're writing more lines of code now on average from working from home than they were in the office. So we're seeing higher levels of productivity. People aren't commuting, taking the time to commute there and back from work, but also just it's so accessible. And I think there'll be more tolerance for personal choice on in-person versus travel. People will less likely to be forced into the office and to travel on planes. There'll be more use of video teleconferencing, of course. Huge reduction in handshakes, hugging, kissing when greeting people or saying goodbye. I think you'll see people meeting in smaller groups, really being who's really essential to be in the room when they meet in person. More meetings outside, taking walking meetings. But I think, we'll still see coffee and lunch meetings. We'll see off-site planned meetings, conferences and events, but of course with requirements to be fully vaccinated by companies and meeting organizers. Vaccination certificates and passing COVID tests will really become the new passports for entry. I think you could expect to see that.
It's strange because I recently saw a couple of articles and there was an announcement by Goldman Sachs, and I think it was JP Morgan, that were basically saying that we're going to have people back in the office by the middle of June, and I think for JP Morgan it was the middle of July. And they made the case that people actually, on the one hand, employees want to go back to the office, but I think they were also making the case that at least in their sector, they felt that people would be more productive back in the office space for whatever reasons. And I don't know exactly what the numbers are like right now. But I do remember at the beginning of like the lockdowns, people were like telling me that they were not as productive as they might have thought they would be, because clearly, you lessen kind of like the commute hours, but you also have this kind of sense that you're at home, and so you're a little bit more relaxed. But that kind of changed with time, and I saw that it started to become normal for people to work from home, right? So, and I think probably somewhere along the way, they started to become just as productive, perhaps even more so, working from home. So I don't know where that's
Raj,
going. Yeah.
you're right. And that's what the data is showing, is that people are more productive working from home than in the office. There's less interruptions and an ability to focus and concentrate. But, I think when we're talking about tactical work, you're right. But I think we also need to delineate between the tactical and the strategic. And when you're talking about planning, ideation, brainstorming, creative thinking, innovation, and the ability to collaborate, I think there's a concern that because of the isolation, the generation of diverse new perspectives will suffer because it is harder to have that casual, conversation. You're setting up a meeting to be on Zoom together or whatever technology you're using. Mm-hmm. And I think that inhibits creativity from the collaborative standpoint. And companies are saying that, especially engineering companies. And, software, I've come from the software industry, and I know that the leaders of software engineering teams want to get their people back in the office because of that creativity and innovation they feel may be suffering. Yeah. Yes, you can execute on your individual tactical work and get that done, but the offsite planning meetings, the brainstorming, that whiteboarding ideas is really, I think, suffering. And we may see that in the marketplace where it's going to take longer to bring new products and new features to market because of the inhibited ability to innovate and create.